topic is the revolution. Hit you with that
Good day, everyone. We are the Group 2, and our topic for today is all about production and cost. Our topic is divided into 3 chapters, namely the production process and cost, the organization of the firm, and the nature of industry. First chapter will be discussed by Ms. Puracan, Ms. Arcon, Ms. Ibanez, and Ms. Balundo. The second chapter will be discussed by Mr. Rosales, Ms. Acobos, Ms. Abdisha, and Mrs. Limasak. And the last chapter will be discussed by Ms. Flores and yours truly. Now, without further ado, let's go to Ms. Flores for the learning objectives.
The production process and cost. In this chapter, our learning objectives after completing this chapter will be able to explain alternative ways of measuring productivity of inputs and the role of the manager in production process. Calculate input demand and the cost minimizing combination of inputs and use ESOQuant analysis to illustrate optimal input substitution. Calculate the cost function from a production function and explain how economic costs differ from accounting cost. Explain the difference between and the economic relevance of fixed cost, sunk cost, variable cost, and marginal cost. Calculate average and marginal cost from algebraic or tabular cost data and illustrate the relationship between average and marginal cost. Distinguish between short-run and long-run production decisions and illustrate their impact on cost and economies of scale. Conclude whether a multiple output production process exhibit economies of scope or cost complementarities and explain their significance for managerial decisions. The organization of firm. In this chapter, our learning objective after completing this chapter will be able to discuss the economic trade-offs associated with obtaining inputs through spot exchange, contracts, or vertical integration. Identify 4 types of specialized investments and explain how each can lead to costly bargaining under investment and/or a hold-up problem. Explain the optimal manner of procuring different types of inputs. Describe the principal agent problem as it relates to owners and managers. Discuss 3 forces that owners can use to discipline managers. Describe the principal agent problem as it relates to managers and workers. Discuss 4 tools the manager can use to mitigate incentive problems in the workplace. In this chapter, in the nature of industry, our learning objectives after completing this chapter will be able to calculate alternative measures of industry structure, conduct and performance, and discuss their limitation. Describe examples of vertical, horizontal, and conglomerate mergers and explain the economic basis for each type of merger. Explain the relevance of Herfindahl-Hirschman Index for antitrust policy, the horizontal merger guidelines. Describe the structure, conduct, program paradigm, the feedback critique, and the relation to 5 forces framework. Identify whether an industry is best described as perfectly competitive, a monopoly, monopolistic competitive, or an oligopoly.
Hi everyone, I am Hazel Puracan, one of the members of Group 2, and I am here with assigned task to report a lesson which is the production functions.
Production function. So in this report, we will tackle the introduction of production function, short-run versus long-run decisions, measures of productivity that we have total product, average product, marginal product. Introduction.
Companies as well as non-profit organizations are in the business of producing goods and services, and their successful operations requires managers to optimally choose the quantity and types of input to use in the production process. The successful operation of a consulting business, for instance, requires getting the right quantity and mix employees, and optimally substituting among these and other inputs as wages and other input prices change. The production function. It is a function that defines the maximum amount of output that can be produced with a given set of inputs. Production function in economics, an equation that expresses the relationships between the quantities of productive factors such as labor and capital used and the amount of product obtained. It can also be used to determine the cheapest combination of productive factors that can be used to produce a given output. In here, we will be tackle differently the short-run versus long-run decisions and measures of productivity. Short-run versus long-run decisions. Short-run decisions. Some factors of production are fixed, and this limits your choices in making input decisions. The level of capital is generally fixed in the short run. However, in the short run, automakers can adjust their use of inputs are called variable factors of production. Long-run decisions is defined as the horizon over which the manager can adjust all factors of production. Fixed factors are the inputs the managers cannot adjust in the short run, while the variable factors are the inputs a manager can adjust to alter production. Fixed factors and variable factors. Measures of productivity. An important component of managerial decisions making is the determination of the productivity of inputs used in the production process. These measures are useful for evaluating the effectiveness of a production process and for making input decisions that maximize profits. So we have three most important measures of productivity: total product, average product, and marginal product. Total product, the maximum level of output that can be produced with a given amount of inputs. It is the starting point for the analysis of short-run production. It indicates how much output a firm can produce according to the laws of diminishing marginal returns. Average product is a measure of the output produced per unit of input, holding all other inputs fixed. Average product, usually abbreviated AP, is found by dividing the total product by the quantity of the variable input. Marginal product is the change in total output attributable to the last unit of an input. Refers to the extra output, return, or profit yielded per unit by advantages from production inputs.
Good day everyone, I am April Arcon. I'm 18 years old, Bachelor of Science in Accounting Information System, Block 2. Introduction. Introduction is typically describe the scope of the documents and gives the brief explanation of summary of documents. It may also explain certain elements that are important to say if explanation are not part of the main text. The reader can have an idea about the following text before they actually start reading it. The concept of production function. In economics, equation that expresses the relationship between the quantities of productive factor used and the amount of product obtained. It states the amount of production that can be factor assuming that most efficient available method of production are used. Time element and production function. A pivotal place the Marshallian theory of values. According to the traditional value theory, the forces of demand and supply determine that price functionally. The supply of a commodity relates to this operational time in the production activity. Cobb, Douglas, and production function reflect the relationship between its input, namely physical capital and labor, and the amount of output produced. It means of calculating the impact of changes in the inputs, the relevant efficiencies, and the yields of production activity. Law of production. The law of production describes the technical possible ways of increasing the level of production. Output may increase in various ways. In the short term, output may be increased by using more of variable factor, while capital and possible other factors as well are kept constant. The law of diminishing marginal return states that adding an additional factor of production results in smaller increase in output. After some optimal level of capital utilization, the additional of any larger amount of a factor of production will be inevitably yield decrease per unit incremental return.
Hi everyone, my name is Elami Ibanez, taking Bachelor of Science in Accounting Information System Block 2 at Talibon Polytechnic College. I am going to report the 7 topics that we can find out in the production process and cost. The 7 topics that I am going to report is the cost function, short-run cost, average and marginal cost, relation among cost, fixed and sunk cost, algebraic forms of cost function, and lastly, the long-run cost. What is cost function? Cost function is a function of input prices and output quantity whose value is the cost of making that output given those input prices, often applied through the use of the cost curve by companies to minimize cost and maximize production efficiency. Input prices are the all costs that go into producing a good or service, or the set of costs incurred to create a product or service. For example, direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead, while the output prices is used to specify the price at which the output of a module are sold. For example, in the case of an electricity module, the price does not include any cost components reflecting the cost of transmission and distribution. The cost function, the overall cost function, is to measure the minimum cost of producing a given level of output for some fixed factor prices. And also, the cost function is very helpful in budgeting process because it helps the management to understand the cost behavior of a product. And that's the cost function. The second one is the short-run cost. In the short-run cost, the cost has short-term implications in the production process, or the period over which the amount of inputs are fixed. In the short run, the manager is free. So the manager is free to alter the use of variable input, but is stuck with existing levels of fixed inputs because inputs are costly, whether fixed or variable. The total cost of producing output in the short run consists of the cost of fixed inputs and the variable inputs. These fixed and variable inputs is the two components of short run cost. So we can talk all about the two components of short run cost. The first is the fixed cost, and it is the cost that do not vary with output. And the second one is the variable cost that change when output is changed. In fixed costs, include the cost of fixed inputs used in production, and in the variable include the cost of inputs that vary with output. So, and that's the short run. Next is the average and marginal cost. Average and marginal cost, in one misconception about cost is that large firms have lower costs than smaller firms because they produce larger quantities of outputs. In the average and marginal cost, large firms or large companies have lower cost, or in the Tagalog, gastos, than smaller firms. In the reason that the large firms or large companies produce larger quantities or amount of outputs. Average fixed cost, defined as fixed cost or FC divided by the number of units of output, or EFC is equal to FC over Q. The concept of average fixed cost is what individuals most likely have in mind when they consider the advantages of producing large quantities of output is that the overhead is spread out over a larger level of output. Since fixed costs do not vary with output, more and more output is produced. The fixed costs are allocated over a greater quantity of output. So that's the average fixed cost. It talks about fixed cost. Of course, the average variable cost, defined as variable cost or VC divided by the number of units output, or EVC is equal to VC times open parenthesis Q close parenthesis over Q. In the average variable cost, it provides a measure of variable cost on a per unit basis. Next is the average total cost, defined as total cost or divided by the number of units of output, or ATC is equal to C open parenthesis Q close parenthesis over Q. Average total cost is analogous to average variable cost, except that it provides a measure of total cost on a per unit basis. So, in this total cost, it is the total of variable cost and the average of fixed cost. And the answer is the average total cost. Marginal cost, the cost of producing an additional unit of output that is change in cost attribute to the last unit of output. In the marginal, when one only input is variable, the marginal cost is the price of that input divided by its marginal product. Remember that marginal product increases initially, reaches a maximum, and then decreases. So, it's a vice versa. When a product is increases, the maximum decreases. Next is the relation among cost. It depicts with the average total, average variable, average fixed, and marginal cost under the assumption that output is infinitely divisible. As we see in the illustration or in the table, the shapes of the curves indicate the relation between. Notice is that the marginal cost curve intersect the ETC and or average total cost and EVC or average variable cost curves that their minimum points. This implies that when marginal cost is below an average cost curve, average cost is declining, and when marginal cost is above average cost is rising. That's all for relations among costs. Next is the fixed and sunk cost. Fixed cost is the cost that do not vary with output. So,
Performance
costs
bonuses, on
that
the
do not
other hand,
vary
work
or
through
do not
performance reward.
depend with
This
the
characteristic
output,
can be a
and the
different
sunk
psychological
cost is a
effect on
cost that
workers.
is lost forever once it has been paid. So sunk costs are excluded from future business decisions because the cost will remain the same regardless of the outcome of a decision. So next is the algebraic forms of cost function. In practice, cost function may take many forms, but the cubic cost function is frequently encountered and closely approximates any cost function. The cubic cost function is given by C open parenthesis Q close parenthesis F plus A Q plus B Q raised to the power of 2 plus C Q raised to the power of 3, where A, B, and C are F and F are constants. Note that F represents fixed cost. Formula of the marginal cost. Marginal cost is simply the derivative of the cost function with respect to output. So, for cubic cost function, C is C open parenthesis Q close parenthesis is equal to F plus AQ plus BQ raised to the power of 2 plus C raised to the power of CQ raised to the power of 3. The marginal cost function is MC open parenthesis Q close parenthesis is equal to A plus 2 BQ plus 3 CQ raised to the power of 2. For example, the derivative of the cubic cost function with respect to Q is dC over dQ is equal to E plus 2BQ plus 3CQ raised to the power of 2, which is the formula for marginal given above. That's the algebraic forms of cost function. Next is the long run cost. All costs are variable because the manager is free to adjust the level of all inputs, or the firm can adjust the fixed factor. In the long run, the firm's manager is free to choose the optimal plant size for producing the desired level of output, and this determines the long run average cost of producing the output level. The long run average curve, or optimal plant size and long run average. Long run average cost curve is a curve that defines the minimum average cost of producing alternative levels of output, allowing for optimal selection of both fixed and variable factors of production. So we can see that the short run average cost curve ETC sub 0 is drawn under the assumption that there are some fixed factors of production. The average total cost, optimal selection of all variables of production, both fixed and variable factors. The long-run cost curve is the envelope of all the short-run average cost curves. This means that the long-run average cost curve lies below every point on the short-run average cost curves, except that it equals each short-run average cost curve at the points where the short-run curves uses fixed factors optimally. Or also we can see that the ETC sub 0 intersect the ETC sub 1 and the ETC sub 1 intersect ETC sub 2. That's the end of my discussion about the topics, the 7 topics in the production of process.
Hi everyone, my name is Angelica G. Balundo, taking Bachelor of Science in Accounting Information System, Block 2. Today's video, I will be discussing my assigned topic. What are economies of scale? Economies of scale refer to the cost advantage experienced by a firm when it increases its level of output. The advantages arises due to the inverse relationship between per unit fixed cost and the quantity produced. It is also result in a fall in average variable cost with an increase in output. Let us proceed the effect of economies of scale on production cost. First, it reduces the per unit fixed cost, a result in increased production. The fixed cost gets spread over more output than before. Second, it reduces per unit variable cost. This occurs as the expanded scale of production increases the efficiency of the production process. So, let us see the chart that displays what economies of scale looks like. The gray line is the long-run average cost of production. We got the average cost by vertical axis and output on horizontal axis. Have you seen this graph? The long-run average cost faced by a firm against its level of output. When the firm expands its output from Q to Q sub 2, its average cost falls from C to C sub 1. Thus, the firm can be said to experience economies of scale up to output level Q sub 2. While in any increase in output beyond Q2 leads to a rise in average cost. This is an example of these economies of scale. They have two types of general economies of scale. First, internal economies of scale. These refer to economies that are unique to a firm or measure a company's efficiency of production. Second, external economies of scale. These refer to economies of scale enjoyed by the entire industry or a business-enhancing factors that occur outside a company but within the same industry. Now, let us proceed the source of economics of scale. First, purchasing. Companies are able can lower prices the more they buy. Second, managerial. Companies that have better management structure or more efficient means you can lower your cost. Third, technological. A technological advancement might drastically change the production process. Now, let us proceed my next topic, which is economic cost versus accounting cost. It is important to recall the difference between economic cost and accounting cost. Accounting costs are the costs most often associated with the cost of producing. For example, accounting costs include direct payments to labor and capital to produce output, while economic costs include opportunity costs when analyzing economic decision. An example of economic cost would be the cost of attending college. The accounting costs include all charges such as tuition, books, food, housing, and other expenditures. As what I see earlier, accounting costs include direct payments. Next is the multiple output cost functions. The production process has focused on situation where the firms produce a single output. Next is the economics of scope. What are economies of scope? Economies of scope is an economic concept that refers to the decrease in the total cost of production when a range of products are produced together rather than separately. At the below, this is the formula of economics of scope, where CQE is the cost of producing quantity QE of good A separately, and CQB is the cost of producing quantity QB of good B separately, and CQE plus QB is the cost of producing quantities QE and QB together. And economies of scope, or S, is the percentage cost saving when the goods are produced together. Therefore, S would be greater than 0 when economies of scope exist. Example of economies of scope. A restaurant produces both hamburgers and sandwiches. The cost of separately producing 1 million hamburgers is $0.50 each. Likewise, if 4 million sandwiches are produced separately, the cost $0.30 each. If 1 million hamburgers and 4 million sandwiches are produced together by using the same preparation and storage facility, the total cost is $1,500,000. To determine the economies of scope, determine CQE equal 1 million times 0.50 equal to $500,000. Determine CQB equal to 4 million times 0.30 equal to $1,200,000. Determine CQE plus QB is 1,500,000. Plug the numbers into the economies of formula. $500,000 plus $1,200,000 equal to $1,700,000 minus $1,500,000 is $200,000 divided by 1,500,000 is equal to 13.33%. Therefore, the cost of producing hamburgers and sandwiches together is 13.33% less than the cost of producing them separately. Let us proceed the cost complementarity. Cost complementarity exists in a multi-product cost function when the marginal cost of producing one output is reduced when the output of another product is increased. Let's see Q1 and Q2 be the cost function for a multi-product firm, and let MC1 and Q1 and Q2 be the marginal cost of producing the firm output. The cost function exhibits cost complementary if that is if an increase in the output of product 2 decrease the marginal cost of producing products 1. An example of cost complementarity is the production of donuts and donut holes. The firm can make these products separately or jointly, but the cost of making additional donut holes is lower when workers roll out the dough, punch the holes, and fry both the donuts and the holes instead of making the holes separately.
Good day everyone, my name is Rafi Rosales and I am here to discuss to you my assigned topic, which is methods of procuring inputs. Methods of procuring inputs. A manager can use several approaches to obtain the inputs needed to produce a final product. The manager has three options. First, purchase the inputs using spot exchange. Second, acquire inputs under a contract. And lastly, produce the inputs internally. Spot exchange. An informal relationship between a buyer and a seller in which neither party is obligated to adhere to specific terms for exchange. Spot exchange occurs when the buyer and seller of an input meet, exchange, and then go their separate ways. Example: if the manager of a car rental company simply takes a car to one of many firms that provide automobile servicing and pays for the services, the manager has used spot exchange to obtain the automobile servicing. With a spot exchange, buyers and seller essentially are anonymous. The parties may make up an exchange without even knowing each other's name, and there is no formal or legal relationship between buyer and seller. A key advantage of acquiring inputs with a spot exchange is that the firm gets the specialized in doing what it does best, converting the inputs into output. Contract, a formal relationship between a buyer and seller that obligates the buyer and seller to exchange at terms specified in a legal document. A contract is a legal document that creates an extended relationship between particular buyer and seller of an input. It specifies the terms under which they are agreed to exchange over a given time horizon. Example: the manager of the car rental firm might choose to formalize her relationship with a particular firm that services automobiles by signing a contract. Such a contract specifies the range of services covered, the price of each service, and the hours during which the cars will be serviced, as long as the service requirements for the automobiles are understood beforehand. The parties can address all the important issues in the written contract. However, if the number of services needed during the term of the contract is very large, or if some types of unanticipated breakdowns occur, the contract may be incomplete. By acquiring inputs with contracts, the purchasing firm enjoys the benefits of specializing in what it does best, because the other firm actually produces the inputs the purchasing firm needs. One key disadvantage of contract is that they are costly to write. It takes time and often legal fees to draw up a contract that specifies precisely the obligation of both parties. Vertical integration. A situation where a firm produces the inputs required to make its final product. Produce the inputs internally. Manager may choose to produce the inputs needed for production within the firm. Example, the manager of the car rental company dispenses with the outside service firms entirely. She sets up a facility to service the automobile fleet with her own employees as a servant personnel. When a firm thus bypasses the service market completely and does the work itself, when a firm shuns other suppliers and chooses to produce an input internally, it has engaged in vertical integration. However, firm loses the gain in specialization. It would realize where the inputs purchased from an independent supplier. The firm now has to manage the production of input as well as the production of the final product produced with those inputs. This leads to the bureaucratic costs associated with a larger organization. Transaction cost is a cost associated with acquiring an input that are in excess of the amount paid to the input supplier. When a firm acquires an input, it may incur costs in excess of the actual amount paid to the input supplier. These costs are known as transaction costs and play a crucial role in determining optimal input will be purchased and putting the input to use. Transaction includes the cost of searching for a supplier willing to sell a given input, the cost of negotiating a price at which the input will be purchased. These costs may be in terms of the opportunity cost of time, legal fees, and so forth. Other investments and expenditures required to facilitate exchange. Example, if an input supplier charges a price of $10 per unit but requires you to furnish your own trucks and drivers to pick up the input, the transaction to your firm includes the cost of the trucks and the personnel needed to deliver the input to your plant. Clearly, the relevant price of the input to your firm includes not only the $10 per unit, but also the transaction cost of getting the input to your plant. Specialized investment is an expenditure that must have been made to allow two parties to exchange but has little or no value in any alternative use. Example, suppose that to ascertain the quality of bolts, it is necessary to spend $100 on a machine that tests the bolt's strength. If the machine is useful only for testing a particular manufacturer's bolts and the investment in the machine is sunk cost, it is specialized investment. In the contrast, if the machine can be sold at its purchase price or used to test the quality of bolts produced by other firms, it does not represent specialized investment. Types of specialized investments. Site specificity occurs when the buyer and the seller of an input must locate their plants too close to each other to be able to engage in exchange. Example, electric power plants often locate close to a particular coal mine to minimize the transportation cost of obtaining coal. The electricity is less expensive to ship than the coal. The cost of building the two plants close to each other represents a specialized investment that would have little value if the parties were not involved in exchange. Physical asset specificity refers to a situation where the capital equipment needed to produce an input is designed to meet the needs of a particular buyer and cannot be readily adapted to produce inputs needed by the other buyers. Example, if producing a lawn mower engine requires a special machine that is useful only for producing engines for a particular buyer, the machine is a specific physical asset for producing the engines. Dedicated assets are general investment made by a firm that allow it to exchange with a particular buyer. Example, suppose the computer manufacturer opens a new assembly line to enable it to produce enough computers for a large government purchaser. If opening the new assembly line is profitable, only if the government actually purchases the firm's computer. The investments represents a dedicated assets. Human capital. A fourth type of specialized investment is human capital. In many employment relationships, workers must learn specific skills to work for a particular firm. If these skills are not useful or transferable to the other employers, they represent a specialized investment. Relationship-specific exchange. A type of exchange that occurs when a parties to a transaction have made specialized investments. When specialized investments are required to facilitate an exchange, the resulting relationship of the parties is known as a relationship-specific exchange. The distinguishing feature of relationship-specific exchange is that the two parties are tied together because of the specific investments made to facilitate exchange between them. As we will see, this feature often creates transaction costs due to the sunk nature of the specific investments.
Cost concepts and cost-output relationship. In managerial economics, cost is normally considered from producers or firms' point of view. In producing a commodity or service, a firm has to enjoy an aggregable of various factors of production such as land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. The term cost has various concepts. These are real cost, opportunity cost, and money cost. Real cost. It is the cost of producing a good service, including the cost of all resources used and the loss of not employing those resources in alternative uses. In much philosophical ways, Marshall 1920 describes real cost as follows. The production of a commodity generally requires many different kinds of labor and the use of capital in many forms. Evidently, the concept of real cost is an abstract idea. Its exact measurement is not possible. For example, real cost of a table is composed of carpenter's labor, 2 cubic feet of wood, a dozen of nails, half a bottle of varnish paint, and depreciation of carpenter's tools.
Market structure, conduct,
Opportunity cost or
and
alternative
performance.
cost. Opportunity cost is the profit lost when one alternative is selected over another. Thus, the opportunity cost is measured in terms of the foregone benefits from the next best alternative use of a given resource. For example, you spend time and money going to a movie. You cannot spend that time of the home reading book, and you cannot spend the money on something else. Importance of the concept of opportunity cost. The concept of opportunity cost has a great economic significance. First is determination of relative prices of goods. The concept of opportunity cost is useful in explaining the determination of relative prices of different goods. Second is determination of normal remuneration to a factor. It implies that if a productive factor is to be retained in its next best alternative use, it must be compensated for or paid at least what it can earn from its next best alternative use. Decision making and efficient resource allocation. The concept of opportunity cost is essential in rational decision making by the producer. Money cost. It is also known as the nominal cost. It is nothing but the expenses incurred by a firm to produce a commodity. It is also a cost of production measured in terms of money. Money cost is the monetary expenditures or inputs kinds raw material, labor, or etc. required for the output. Explicit cost. Explicit costs are direct contractual monetary payments incurred. The following items of firm's expenditure are explicit money costs: cost of raw materials, wages and salaries, power charges, rent of business of factory premises, interest payments of capital invested, insurance premiums, taxes like property tax or duties, license fees, and etc., miscellaneous business expenses like marketing and advertising expenses, such as selling costs, transport costs, and etc. Implicit costs are the opportunity costs of a use factors which a firm does not buy or hire but already owns. Implicit costs are as follows: wages of labor rendered by the entrepreneur himself, interest and capital supplied by him, rent of land and premises belonging to the entrepreneur himself and used in his production, normal returns or profit of entrepreneur, a compensation needed for his management and organizational activity. These items are to be valued at current market rates for estimating the implicit money cost. Under implicit money cost, normal costs are returned to an entrepreneur management function is included. Economic cost is equals to accounting or explicit cost plus implicit cost. Accounting and economic cost. In economics, the cost of production consists of remuneration to all factors of production, viz., wages to labor, rent to land, interest to capital, and normal profits to the entrepreneur. An economist's idea of cost of production differs from that an accountant. In sum, while an accountant includes only explicit costs in his cost calculations, economist includes in its explicit and implicit cost. Fixed and variable cost. It may be recalled that the short-run periods to the time arrival during which some factors unit cannot be adjusted. The short-run production function Q is equals to F times A, B, C, D, so on and so forth, stated in general implies two sets of input component. The fixed factor inputs, these factors are for instance machinery's factor, building, managerial staff, and etc., which remain unchanged over a period of time. Variable factors are labor, raw material, power, and etc., the inputs or which are varied to carry the output in the short run. Since costs refer to prices paid to the factor of production, prices paid for fixed factors and thus paid for variable factors are termed at fixed cost and variable cost respectively. Fixed costs may be classified into two: recurrent fixed costs and allocable fixed costs. Recurrent fixed costs are those which give rise to cash output as certain explicit payments like rent, interest and capital, general insurance premiums, salaries of permanent irreducible staff are to be made at a regular time interval by the firm. Allocable fixed costs refer to implicit at-money costs like depreciation changes which involve no direct cash outlays but are to be reckoned on the basis of time rather than usage. Variable costs or prime costs are those costs that are incurred of variable factors. They are independent up on the level of output. The short-run variable includes price of raw material, wages of labor, fuel and power charges, excise duties or sale tax, transport expenditures, and etc. Variable costs may be classified into two: fully variable cost and semi-variable cost. 7 types of production costs and their measurement. First is total cost or TC. It is the aggregate of expenditures incurred by the firm in producing a given level of output. Total cost is measured in relation to the production of function by multiplying factors' prices with their quantities. If the production function is Q is equals to F times A, B, C, and so on, then total cost is TC is equals to F times Q, which means total cost varies with output. Thus, total cost may be viewed as the sum of total fixed costs and total variable costs at each level of output. Symbolically, total costs is equals to total fixed costs plus total variable costs. Total variable cost or TVC. Corresponding to variable inputs in the short-run production is the total variable cost, and is obtained by summing up the product of quantities of input multiplied by their prices. Again, total variable cost is equals to function times quantities, which means total variable cost is an increasing multiplied by their prices. Suppose in our illustration of the furniture short proprietor, if he were to start with the production of chair, he employs a carpenter on a wage of 200 per chair. He buys wood worth 2,000 pesos, a resin sheet worth of 1,500 pesos, spend 400 for other requirements to produce 3 chairs. Then his total variable cost for producing 3 chairs is measured as 2,000 price of a wood plus 1,500 the resin sheet plus 400 the allied cost plus 600 labor charges is equals to 4,500. Average fixed cost or AFC. Average fixed cost is total fixed cost divided by total units of output. Average fixed cost is equals to total fixed cost divided by quantities, where Q stands for the numbers of units of the product. Thus, average fixed cost is the fixed cost per unit of output. In the above example, thus when total fixed cost is equals to 3,500 and Q is equals to 3, AFC is equals to 3,500 divided by 3 is equals to 1,166.67 pesos. Average variable cost or AVC. Average variable cost is total variable loss divided by total units of output. AVC is equals to TVC divided by Q, where AVC means average variable cost. Thus, average variable cost is variable cost per unit of output. In the above example, TVC is equals to 4,500 for Q is equals to 3. So, AVC is equals to 4,500 divided by 3 is equals to 1,500. Average total cost or ATC. Average total cost or average cost is total cost divided by total units of output. Thus, ATC or AC is equals to TC over Q. In the short run, since TC is equals to TFC plus TVC, ATC is equals to TC over Q is equals to TFC plus TVC over Q is equals to TFC over Q plus TVC over Q. Since TFC over Q is equals to AFC and TVC divided by Q is equals AVC or ATC is equals AFC plus AVC. Marginal cost. It is also a per unit of cost of production. It is the addition made to the total cost by providing one or more unit of output. Symbolically, MCN is equals to TCN minus TCN minus 1. That is, the marginal cost of the nth unit of output is the total cost of producing n units ruins the total cost of producing n minus 1 or 1 less in the total or units of output. Suppose the total cost of producing 4 chair or n is equals to 4 is 10,000, while for 3 chair n is equals to 1 is 8,000. Marginal cost of producing the 4th chair therefore works out as under MC4 is equals to TC4 minus TC3. 10,000 minus 8,000 is equals to 2,000. Symbolically thus, MC is equals TC divided by Q, where D denote change in output assumed to change by 1 unit only. Therefore, output change is denoted by D. It must be remembered that marginal cost of producing an additional unit of output and not of average product. It indicates the change in total cost of producing an additional unit.
Managerial compensation and the principal-agent problem. A principal-agent relationship is one in which a principal employs an agent to undertake a task, such as shareholders employing managers to run a firm. The objectives of the principal and agent may be quite different. Shareholders like a high profit and a high share price. Managers like such things as prestige, income, pleasant work, and perquisites. More simply, managers may wish to do as little as possible for the greatest possible reward. Therefore, we use the term effort to describe a manager foregoing his or her own objectives to attend to the wishes of shareholders. Greater effort on the part of the manager can usually increase a firm's profit. Forces that disciplines managers. Take note, favoritism. Most managers and discipline enforcers in firms favor some staff in their decision making. Lack of communication. If the laws and rules governing the employment of staff is not clearly communicated or is not communicated at all, there is bound to be several cases. Lack of leadership. For every department, there should be a leader who is to supervise the activities of that department. He monitors and instills discipline in his subordinates. External incentives. External incentives can include such things as peer recognition, fame, social status, and power. Some of these incentives will work better than others, depending upon your preferences. Someone may care more about social status, for example, than money. Gaining esteem and accolades from teachers and parents might be another incentive. Money is also an excellent example of an external reward that motivates behavior. In many cases, these external rewards can motivate you to do things that you might otherwise avoid, such as chores, work, and other tasks you find unpleasant. Reputation. The beliefs or opinions that are generally held about someone or something. A widespread belief that someone or something has a particular habit or characteristics.
Good morning, everyone. I am Dalma Luna Madrona from BS Accounting Information System. My report is about the managerial worker principal-agent problem. When we introduce principal-agent problem, the owner of the firm was viewed as having different objectives from manager. There is nothing special about the owner-manager relationship that gives rise to the principal-agent problem. Indeed, there is a similar problem. The manager and the employees the supervises. Solution to the manager-worker-principal-agent problem. Profit sharing. One mechanism the manager can use to enhance workers' effort is profit sharing, making the workers' compensation dependent on the underlying profitability of the firm. Revenue sharing. Another mechanism for including greater effort by workers is revenue sharing, linking compensation to the underlying revenues of the firm. Example of these types of incentive scheme include tips and sales commissions. Revenue sharing is particularly effective when workers' productivity is related to revenue rather than cost. Example, a restaurant manager can design contract whereby servers get some fraction of a tips. The tips is presumed to be an increasing function of the server's quality productivity.
The manager of a sale firms can provide incentive to employees by paying them a percentage of the sales they generate. One problem with revenue-based incentive schemes is that they do not provide an incentive for workers to minimize costs. For example, a food server may attempt to collect a big tip by offering the customer larger portions, free drinks, and the like, which will enhance the tip at the expense of the restaurant's cost.
These rates. An alternative compensation method is to pay workers based on a piece rate rather than on a fixed hourly wage. Example, by paying a fixed amount per page type, the payment to the type depends on the output produced. To earn more money, the types must type more pages during given time period. One advantage of revenue or profit sharing is that it reduces the incentive to produce low quality products. Time clocks and spot checks. Many firms use time clocks to assess managers in monitoring workers. Time clocks essentially are designed to verify when an employee arrives and departs from the job. The advantage of spot checks is that they reduce the cost of monitoring workers. A disadvantage of spot checks is that they must occur frequently enough to induce workers not to risk getting caught cheating, and they must entail some penalty for workers caught checking.
Performance bonuses, on the other hand, work through a promise of reward. This characteristic can have different psychological effects on workers. Market structure. Market structure refers to the factors such as the number of firms that compete in a market, the relative size of the firm's technological and cost conditions, demands conditions, and the ease with which firms can enter or exit the industry. Different industries have different structures, and these structures affect the decisions a prudent manager will make. The following subsections provide an overview of the major structural variables that affect managerial decisions. So, it starts with first, firm size. The size of a business unit means the size of a business firm. It means the scale or volume of operation turned out by a single firm. The term size of a business refers to the scale of the organization and the operations of a business enterprise. The next is the industry concentration. Another factor that affects managerial decision is the size distribution of firms within an industry. Some industries are dominated by few large firms, while others are composed of many small firms. There are two measures that economists use to gauge the degree of concentration in an industry. Under industry concentration, here is concentration ratios. It measures how much of a total output in an industry is produced by the largest firms in that industry. It has two classifications: the four-firm concentration ratio and the Herfindahl-Hirschman index. The most common concentration ratio is the four-firm concentration ratio, or say C sub 4. The four-firm concentration ratio is the fraction of total industry sales produced by the four largest firms in the industry. Let S sub 1, S sub 2, S sub 3, and S sub 4 denote the sales of the four largest firms in an industry, and let S sub 3 denote the total sales of all firms in the industry. The four-firm concentration ratio is given by C sub 4 is equals to S sub 1 plus S sub 2 plus S sub 3 plus S sub 4 divided by S sub t. That is the formula given for four-firm concentration ratio, where equivalently the four-firm concentration ratio is the sum of the market shares of the top four firms. It is defined as C sub 4 is equals to W sub 1 plus W sub 2 plus W sub 3 plus W sub 4, where W sub 1 is equals to S sub 1 or S sub t, W sub 2 is S sub 2, W sub 3 is S sub 3, and W sub 4 is S sub 4, where an industry is composed of a very large number of firms, each of which is very small. The four-firm concentration ratio is close to zero. When four or fewer firms produce all of an industry's output, the four-firm concentration ratio is 1. The closer the four-firm concentration ratio is to 0, the less concentrated the industry. The closer the ratio is to 1, the more concentrated the industry. So, if ang imong concentration ratio kay dool sa 0 na, less concentrated siya. Pero kung dool na po siya sa 1, mo itong gitawag nga mga industry nga concentrated sila sa ilahang concentration ratio provide a very crude measurement of the size structure of an industry. Four-firm concentration ratios that are close to 0 indicates market in which there are many sellers, giving rise to much competition among producers for the right to sell to consumers. Industries with four-firm concentration ratios close to 1 indicate markets in which there is a little competition among producers for sales to consumers. The Herfindahl-Hirschman Index (HHI) is the sum of the squared market shares of firms in a given industry, multiplied by 10,000 to eliminate the need for decimals. By squaring the market shares before adding them up, the index weights firms with high market shares more heavily. Suppose firm I shares the total market output is W sub I is equals to S sub I divided by S sub t, where S sub I is the firm's I sales and S sub t is the total sales in the industry. The Herfindahl-Hirschman Index is given by HHI is equals to 10,000 summation of W squared sub I. So that is the formula of Herfindahl-Hirschman Index. The value of the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index lies between 0 and 10,000. A value of 10,000 arises when a single firm with a market share of W sub 1 is equals to 1 exists in the industry. A value of 0 results when there are numerous infinitesimally small firms. Technology. Industries also differ with regard to the technologies used to produce goods and services. Some industries are very labor-intensive, requiring much labor to produce goods and services. Other industries are very capital intensive, requiring large investment in plant, equipment, and machines to be able to produce goods. These differences in the technology give rise to differences in production techniques across industries. Technology is also important within a given industry. In some industries, firms have access to identical technologies and therefore have similar cost structures. In other industries, one or two firms have access to technology that is not available to other firms. In these instances, the firms with superior technology will have an advantage over other firms. When this technological advantage is significant, the technologically superior firm or firms will completely dominate the industry. The demand and market conditions. Industry also differ with regard to the underlying demand and market conditions. In industries with relatively low demand, the market may be able to sustain only a few firms. In industries where demand is great, the market may require many firms to produce the quantity demanded. The elasticity of demand for products tends to vary from industry to industry. Moreover, the elasticity of demand for an individual firm's product generally will differ from market elasticity of demand for the product. In some industries, there is a large discrepancy between an individual firm's elasticity of demand and the market elasticity. The reason for this can be easily explained. One measure of the elasticity of industry's demand for a product relative to that of an individual firm is the Rothschild's index. The Rothschild's index provides a measure of sensitivity to price of the product group as a whole relative to sensitivity of quality demanded of a single firm to change in its price. The Rothschild index is given by R is equals to E sub T divided E sub F, where E sub T is the elasticity of demand for the total market and E sub F is the elasticity of demand for the product of an individual firm. The Rothschild index takes a value between 0 and 1. When the index is 1, the individual firm faces a demand curve that has the same sensitivity to price as the market demand curve. In contrast, when the elasticity of demand for individual firms' product is much greater or in absolute value than the elasticity of the market demand, the Rothschild's index is close to 0. In this instance, an individual firm's quantity demanded is more sensitive to a price increase than the industry as a whole. In other words, when the Rothschild index is less than 1, a 10% increase in one firm's price will decrease that firm's quantity demanded by more than the total industry quantity would fall if all firms in the industry increase their prices by 10%. The Rothschild index therefore provides a measure of how price sensitive an individual firm demand is relative to the entire market. When an industry is composed of many firms, each producing similar products, the Rothschild index will be close to 0. Conduct. In addition to structural differences across industries, the conduct or behavior of firms also tends to differ across industries. Some industries charge higher markup than other industries. Some industries are more susceptible to mergers or takeovers than others. In addition, the amount spent on advertising and research and development tends to vary across industries. The following subsections describe important differences in conduct that exist across industries. First is the pricing behavior. Pricing behavior defined as the firm in some industries charge higher markup than firms in other industries. To illustrate this fact, we introduce what economists refers to as Lerner Index. Lerner Index measures of the difference between price and marginal cost as a fraction of the product's price. Lerner Index is given by the formula L is equals to P minus MC divided by P, where P is the price and MC is the marginal cost. Thus, the Lerner Index measured the difference between price and marginal cost as a fraction of the price of the product. When a firm sets its price equal to the marginal cost of production, the Lerner Index is 0. Consumers pay a price for the product that exactly equals to the cost to the firm of producing another unit of the good. When a firm charges a price that is higher than marginal cost, the Lerner index takes a value greater than zero, with the maximum possible value being unity. The Lerner index therefore provides a measure of how much firms in an industry mark up their prices over marginal cost. The higher the Lerner index, the greater the firm's markup. In industries in which firms rigorously compete for consumer sales by attempting to charge the lowest price in the market, the Lerner index is close to zero. When firms do not rigorously compete for consumers through price competition, the Lerner index is closer to 1. The Lerner index is related to the markup charged by a firm. In particular, we can rearrange the formula for the Lerner index to obtain P is equals to 1 divided by 1 minus L times MC, or marginal cost, where it is defined as 1 divided by 1 minus L is the markup factor. It defines the factor by which marginal cost is multiplied to obtain the price of the good. When the Lerner index is 0, the markup factor is 1, and thus the price is exactly equal to the marginal cost. If the Lerner index is 1/2, the markup factor is 2. In this case, the price charged by a firm is 2 times the marginal cost of the production, so it is way higher than the other one if the Lerner index is 1/2. Integration and merger activity. Integration refers to uniting productive resources. Integration can occur through a merger in which two or more existing firms unite or merge into a single firm. Mergers can result from an attempt by firms to reduce transaction costs, reap the benefits of economies of scale and scope, increase market power, or gain better access to capital markets. Some mergers are friendly in that both firms desire to merge into a single firm. Others are hostile, meaning that one of the firms does not desire the merger to take place. So murag napoy duha kon sa mergers. Ang friendly where nag-aim sila para sa kayuhan sa usag usa, ag ang hostile where ag usa dili ganahan nga mas mulabaw ang usa. So the economists distinguish among three types of integration or mergers. It is called the vertical, horizontal, and conglomerate. So let's define the vertical integration. Vertical integration refers to a situation where various stages in the production of a single product are carried out in a single firm. For instance, an automobile manufacturer that produces its own steel uses the steel to make the car bodies, engines, and finally sells an automobile is vertically integrated. A vertical merger is the integration of two or more firms that produce components of a single product. The next one is horizontal integration. Horizontal integration refers to the merging of the production of similar products into a single firm. Horizontal integration involves merging two or more final products into a single firm. Horizontal merger, by its very definition, reduces the number of firms that compete in a product market. This tends to increase both of the four firms' concentration ratio and the Herfindahl-Hirschman index for the industry, which reflects an increase in the market power of firms in the industry. The social benefits of the reduced cost due to a horizontal merger must be weighed against the social costs associated with more concentrated industry. So, diri dapita mo ni ang duha na ka company nga pareha og product mag-merge para makahimo na pug anaing final product. So sa conglomerate mergers pod, conglomerate merger involves the integration of different product lines into a single firm. A conglomerate merger is similar to a horizontal merger in that it involves merging final products into a single firm. It differs from horizontal merger because the final products are not related. So performance defined as refers to the profits and social welfare that result in a given industry. It is important for future managers to recognize that profits and social welfare vary considerably across industries. Profits describes the financial benefit realized when revenue generated from business activity exceeds the expenses, costs, and taxes involved in sustaining the activity in question. Profit is calculated as total revenue less total expenses. Sa dali nga pagkasulti, ginansya. Social welfare. Another gauge of industry performance is the amount of consumer and producer surplus generated in a market. R.A. Dansby and R.D. Willig have proposed a useful index. It is called the Dansby-Willig Performance Index. The Dansby-Willig Performance Index measures how much social welfare, defined as the sum of consumer and producer surplus, would improve if firms in an industry expanded out in a socially efficient manner. The Dansby-Willig Performance Index ranks industries according to how much social welfare would improve if the output in an industry were increased by a small amount. The Dansby-Willig Index does allow one to rank industries according to how much social welfare would rise if the industry altered its output. Industries with large index values have poorer performance than industries with lower values.
Good day, I'm Nicole Ann Ayrama, and I'm here to discuss the structure, conduct, performance paradigm. In the last video, Ms. Flores discussed the meaning of structure, conduct, and performance in the business industry. For a little recap, we have here a short description of the structure of an industry. It refers to factors such as technology, concentration, and market conditions. Conduct refers to how individual firms behave in the market. It involves pricing decisions, advertising decisions, and decisions to invest in research and development, among other factors. Meanwhile, the performance refers to the resulting profits and social welfare that arise in the market. I suppose that you have already familiarized yourself with those three terminologies, so let's proceed with our topic. Our goal for this lesson is to understand how these three terminologies, the structure, conduct, and performance, relate to each other by the different paradigms. First is we have the causal view. The causal view of industry asserts that market structure causes firms to behave in a certain way. In turn, this behavior or conduct causes resources to be allocated in certain ways, leading to either good or poor market performance. So, unang paradigm na to is ang causal view. Ingon ang causal view nga ang market structure daw ang reason nga nung maka-come up o certain behavior or conduct ang usa ka market or firm. Ang market structure daw ang reason nga nung maka-come up sila og certain decisions sa ilang business. And katong desisyon na nga ilahang nahimo silang negosyo, makagama sad og feedback sa ilang performances kung maayo ba ang pagtan-aw sa mga consumers or dili, or kung ning taas pa ang ilang profit adto nga desisyon na or ning ubos. For example, consider a highly concentrated industry in which only a few firms compete for the right to sell products to consumers. According to the causal view, this structure gives firms market power, enabling them to charge high prices for their products. So, diba ingon ang causal view nga ang market structure mao kuno yung reason sa behavior or conduct sa usa ka market or firm, and such behavior or conduct leads to its market performance. Ibase nato sa example ganina, ang market structure adto is the presence of few competitors. So, gamay ra sila nga nagkompetensya. So, tungod kay gamay raman, naka-decide or nakagama o conduct or behavior ang market or firm nga nagpataas sila og presyo. Nag-charge sila og high price. Kay nga kuno, kay gamay raman kuno sila nga competitor. So, mao to ang causal view nga tungod kuno sa market structure nakahimo sila og behavior. Iba sila to sa example, tungod kuno sa presence of few competitors nakahimo sila og charge og high price. Then ingon pud ang causal view nga tungod kuno sa behavior nga gihimo maka-resulta kuno pud to og certain market performance. So sa atong example is Ang ilang behavior kay nag-charge sila og high price. So katong high price ning lead to siya og market performance, which is high ang profit pero poor ang social welfare performance. Thus, according to the causal view, a concentrated market causes high prices and poor performance. Next paradigm is the feedback critic. According to the feedback critic, there is no one-way causal link among structure, conduct, and performance. Meaning, dili lang kuno ang structure ang makaapekto sa behavior and dili lang pud kuno ang behavior may makaapekto sa market performance. It can be either ways. The conduct of firms can affect market structure. Market performance can affect conduct as well as market structure. Maulay kuno to nga ang structure, ang conduct o ang performance mag-isig apektuhay ra kuno na sila. Dili pareha sa causal view nga ang structure ray makaapekto sa behavior, ang behavior ay makaapekto sa market performance. For example, according to the feedback critic, the conduct of firms in an industry may itself lead to a concentrated market. If the few existing firms are charging low prices and earning low economic profits, there will be no incentive for additional firms to enter the market. If this is the case, it could actually be low prices that cause the presence of few firms in the industry. In the said example, it just showed that even the behavior or conduct can affect the market structure. Again, it is different from the causal view wherein it was just only a one-way link. It can be either ways. It may be the conduct that causes the structure, or it may be the market performance that causes the conduct, or the market structure causes the market performance, and it's vice versa. Next is we have the 5 forces framework with feedback effects. Now, the 5 forces framework suggests that these 5 interrelated forces affect the level, growth, and sustainability of industry profits. The 5 interrelated forces, namely entry, power of input suppliers, power of buyers, industry rivalry, and substitutes and complements. These 5 forces capture elements of the structure and conduct of firms in the industry, while the level, growth, and sustainability of industry profits are elements of performance. This is what the 5 forces composed with. Kaning lima is the structure and conduct of firms. Then kaning level, growth, and sustainability of industry profits, kaning nasa tunga, mao kunin ni ang elements of performance. So, same rin siya sa feedback critic nga ang structure, conduct, and performance mag-isig apektuhay rin ni sila. Dili na po rin siya one way. Now we are done with the structure, conduct, performance paradigm. Let's proceed to the overview of the remainder of the book. The terminologies that I will show in this video will be just an overview of the lessons that we are about to encounter in the next discussion. First is we have the perfect competition. In markets characterized by perfect competition, there are many firms, each of which is small relative to the entire market. The firms have access to the same technologies and produce similar products, so no firm has any real advantage over other firms in the industry. Firms in perfectly competitive markets do not have market power. That is, no individual firm has a perceptible impact on the market price, quantity, or quality of the production produced in the market. Firms in this market are price takers, means that they have to take the price set by the market. Next is the monopoly. A monopoly is a firm that is the sole producer of good or service in the relevant market. For instance, most local utility companies are the sole providers of electricity and natural gas in a given city. Some towns have a single gasoline station or movie theater that serves the entire local market. All of these constitute local monopolies. In this market structure, there is a tendency for the seller to capitalize on the monopoly position by restricting output and charging a price above marginal cost. Because there are no firms in the market, consumers cannot switch to another producer in the face of higher prices. Third is monopolistic competition. In a market characterized by monopolistic competition, there are many firms and consumers, just as in perfect competition. Unlike in perfect competition, however, each firm produces a product that is slightly different from the products produced by other firms. Those who manage restaurants in a city containing numerous food establishments is an example of it. A firm in a monopolistically competitive market has some control over the price charged for the product. Last is oligopoly. In an oligopolistic market, a few large firms tend to dominate the market. Firms in highly concentrated industries such as the airline, automobile, and aerospace industries operate in an oligopolistic market. The distinguishing feature of an oligopolistic market is mutual interdependence among firms in the industry, which means that when one firm in an oligopolistic market changes its price or marketing strategy, not only its own profits, but the profits of other firms in the industry are affected. Consequently, when one firm in an oligopoly changes its conduct, other firms in the industry have an incentive to react to the change by altering their own conduct. Thus, the feature of an oligopolistic market is interdependent. The strategic plans of one firm in an oligopoly depend on how that firm expects other firms in the industry to respond to the plans if they are adopted. Now I have given you an overview of the 4 basic market models. Are you ready to learn more about it? Because I myself is excited. Thank you for watching and listening. I hope that you have learned something in this video.